Welcome to Blaze News, the Mandate Day 106. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, we start with a big one. President Trump will sign an executive order banning federally funded gain-of-function research in countries lacking proper oversight. Now, that includes China. The Trump administration will pay illegal aliens $1,000 to self-deport by using the Trump administration's CBP Home app. The DHS says that this move will save taxpayers up to $1 million per family. Bill Malugian spoke about this story on Fox News. Here's what he had to say.
Fox News can report exclusively that DHS will announce today that they're going to start paying for the commercial flights of illegal aliens who self-deport from the U.S. And on top of that, they're going to pay them an additional $1,000 stipend once they're confirmed to have left the country. Now, DHS says doing this is going to be significantly cheaper for the American taxpayer. They tell us that right now it costs on average about $17,000 to arrest, detain, and deport someone.
President Trump demonstrated he has plenty of stamina at the age of 78. Doing a 90-minute interview with Kristen Welker on Meet the Press, Trump used the opportunity to promote some of the benefits of his big, beautiful bill.
We're talking about the great, big, beautiful bill, you know, that we're trying to get passed. It'll be the biggest tax cuts in the history of our country. And hopefully it'll get done. And the Democrats are fighting us. And if it doesn't get done, it's going to be a 68% tax increase. So that's going to be the Democrats. But I think we're going to have it done. I think the Republicans are going to vote for it. And it'll be the most consequential bill, I think, in the history of our country.
Trump also ordered that Alcatraz prison be restored as a symbol of law and order to lock up the dregs of society. On True Social, he wrote, "No longer will we tolerate these serial offenders who spread filth, bloodshed, and mayhem on our streets." Here's what Trump told reporters about reopening that prison.
Where did you get the idea for reopening Alcatraz?
Just an idea I've had, and I guess because the judges, so many of these radicalized judges, they want to have trials for every single, think of it, every single person that's in our country illegally, they came in illegally, that would mean millions of trials, and it's just so ridiculous what's happening. And it's long been a symbol, Alcatraz, of whatever it is. I mean, you know, it's a sad symbol, but it's a symbol of law and order. And, you know, it's got quite a history, frankly. So I think we're going to do that, and we're looking at it right now.
Finally, a State Department budget analyst in the protocol office pled guilty to stealing over $650,000 between 2022 and 2024. And how many more cases like this could DOJ find through its audits? Let's go ahead and bring in Blaze News editor-in-chief, Matthew Peterson. I mean, we look at this story, and this is a story that they say we wouldn't have caught if we didn't have DOJ, because the person was going in there, writing checks to herself, and then switching it out once she had actually cleared the check into a name that was something official used in the State Department. So it's so difficult to find the bad guys when they know exactly the way that the system works. And yet there's $650,000 that's just gone from the American taxpayers.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And this is an example of, $650,000 in the, when we're talking about a budget in the tune of trillions of dollars in debt. It sounds like nothing, but it's a perfect example of how loose this thing is and how much money is just being taken, in this case, just outright embezzled from the U.S. taxpayer. So DOJ is just the start of what we need. But this is a great example of how corrupt the government is. All your worst fears are true. It's even worse than people thought. And so we can't have enough transparency. We need more DOJ, not less.
The very first story that we were talking about, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya was telling us, look out for news on gain of function here really soon when we were in D.C. just a few days ago. And well, now we get the headlines that Donald Trump will sign an executive order to get rid of this in countries like China, like Iran, people that aren't going to play by the rules. We already know this. This could be one of the most consequential things that Donald Trump will do in his entire presidency.
Yes, this is a great day for America, because this is something that's just pure justice that needed to be done to save this country from all the crap that we've been through in the last few years. And, as you already knew, he was hinting about it to you when we were there at the White House. But What he did is something that's common sense. And behind all the COVID stuff, you have to realize is this gain of function research that even President Obama realized needed to stop. But Fauci was able to weasel his way out and continue this dangerous research throughout the world. We had a whole documentary at Blaze about this. And I mean, it's unbelievable that you had people thwarting the executive, thwarting Obama, right? Even a Democrat. Fauci went out of his way to get this research done in foreign countries throughout the world. That has to end, and this is a great beginning.
And we need people in Congress to step up to the plate. Now, we were talking about Donald Trump on the Sunday interviews. I want to just read off a little bit here from a couple people on Twitter, because Insurrection Barbie posted on X. She was just saying, you know, I've watched the Sunday morning shows. I didn't really hear a lot of sense of urgency. I heard a lot of ifs and let's hope so. And our Steve Deace replied to that. And they said, because the plan is actually to wait until Trump is out, you know, in the midterms, and they can't do anything about it. They want the lame duck they don't want the majority that they have right now. They want to lose a bunch of seats, because then you don't actually have to go through and implement a conservative agenda. What we have here is what they often call the uniparty. And I feel like people are starting to kind of wake up and say, wait a minute, Congress has said that they were on board to do all of these things. So why aren't we seeing the action now, the follow through, right? We talked on the show last week with Rebecca Zelko, and she was saying, yeah, they've moved the deadline from Memorial Day now to the 4th of July. Okay, well, yes, that is still earlier than normal, than what we would usually see. But it's once again just kicking the can down the road. And how much is there a sense of urgency that the American people really want to see right now?
Well, as we know, and it's one of the major themes of this show, in order to implement the mandate, you need Congress. And we know there isn't a sense of urgency with a lot of these people. Congress is not used to getting the job done. And they will absolutely use that classic piece of Washington wisdom, which is to I use that word loosely, which is to wait it out. You wait out the executive, you wait out, you know that's going to go by. You slow roll things like bureaucrats do. And Congress is not used to passing legislation. So it's vital that everyone out there start calling them and putting pressure on your congressman. And this show will do the same. We're going to hold these people accountable.
I want to know what needs to happen for me to get $1,000 because I didn't do anything illegal. If we're going through, they say it's about $4,500 per person. It's still much cheaper to do this way for the self-deportation. That's why we're pushing it for them. But we're also like, hey, by the way, here's $1,000 to go along with that. How do I get this as a law-abiding citizen over here? What can I do? What box can I check on my tax returns, perhaps?
$2,000 for Jill to stay. Now, I think. Look, I'm for any and all pressure and encouragement for people to self-deport and leave, as long as they actually deport themselves. And I think what we want ultimately, the government is going to round up a lot of people, but we want people to just start leaving en masse, by the millions. And the more we do to make that happen, the better. This is just one attempt to encourage it along.
Well, we'll have Chris Bedford come back with us right after this. He's going to actually break down how the deep state can commandeer a Trump U.S. attorney pick. Don't go anywhere. This July, there's a global summit of BRICS nations in Rio de Janeiro. The bloc of emerging superpowers, it includes China, Russia, India, Iran. They're all going to be meeting with the goal of displacing the U.S. dollar as the global currency. And they're calling this the Rio Reset. As BRICS nations push forward with their plan, global demand for U.S. dollars will decrease, bringing down the value of the dollar in your savings account. Now, while this transition, it's not going to happen overnight, the Rio Reset in July does mark a pivotal moment when the BRICS objectives move decisively from theoretical possibility towards inevitable reality. So learning to diversify your savings right now, figure it out if it's right for you. Birch Gold Group can help you. You're going to be moved into your hard-earned savings into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals. You can claim your free info kit on gold by texting my name, Jill, to the number 989898. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers. Let Birch Gold arm you with a free, no-obligation info kit on owning gold before July and the Rio Reset. Text Jill to 989898 today.
if the Senate Judiciary Committee does not notice his hearing today for a Thursday hearing, then there is not enough time for him to get confirmed by the Senate by May 20th. So the Senate has a choice. Either they can reject President Trump's law and order mandate man by letting him time out, which then could lead to a fact pattern where Judge Boasberg gets to pick his replacement.
So will the Senate confirm Ed Martin as the D.C. U.S. Attorney? Like Mike Howell said there, they do have until May 20th. And if they don't, Judge Boasberg, as Howell said, will make the decision. And he's, of course, the judge that was going through and blocked Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport all of the illegal immigrants. So here with more is our guy, Chris Bedford. So is the Senate, are they actually going to move on this? Are we going to get Ed Martin or not, Bedford?
Oh, it's hard to say right now. So here's what's going on. It's Monday, which means the Senate is just getting into town. They may be hammering in around 5 p.m. or so, but the senators are just getting here late afternoon. It's unclear yet whether this just fell off the radar and it wasn't paid attention to, which would be a mistake, a big mistake, or whether this was the Senate just trying to passive aggressively ignore one of Trump's appointees, one of his favorite appointees, who has been very vocal on a number of controversial issues, whether it's January 6th prosecutions or Soros Democrats or anything else. Now, that would be classic cowardice if it was the latter. Democrats are screaming things like this is unprecedented. But I can tell you firsthand, as someone who was driven from the district after living there for almost 20 years, that politicized prosecutors is the bread and butter, the invention in this country of Democrats in recent times, where the D.C. prosecutor was completely ignoring attacks on police officers, where the D.C. prosecutor was ignoring gun crimes, with the police chief out in the street begging, saying, please help me. I'm picking these guys up with the illegal guns. I'm picking them up days and weeks later on murder charges. And I had them in my hands, but the prosecutor wouldn't do anything. Instead, the prosecutor's office was entirely focused on January 6th. So this is not unprecedented to have someone who has some political thoughts and some political tweets in this post. It's something the Democrats began and Republicans should not be afraid of, especially when you're actually seeing the sorts of results that Ed Martin has been getting on actually bringing forth prosecutions. I've seen the morale amongst DC police change. It's kind of like nature is healing. I mean, for years in this city, you could say, hey, I was just hit by somebody who looked like they were in a stolen car with the plates ripped off, brand new, slammed it into me, high to their mind, hit a U.S. federal truck. This really happened. A post office truck, I think, again, and then sped off. And the cops are like, what do you want me to do? They're probably gone by now. Because they know that there's not going to be an arrest. Well, I don't know if that's technically illegal, that sort of stuff. Because they know it's not going to be an arrest unless you personally press charges, which is a big pain in the butt for a lot of citizens to do. That I've started to see change. I've seen police really stepping up enforcement. Now, I don't know how much of that is exactly due to Ed Martin versus how much of that is due to other changes that are going on in DC politics and the general backing of the blue that didn't really exist at all for a couple of years, but it is noticeable. Now, pressure campaign has been sudden. I mean, you just saw Mike there, a great friend of the show, talking with Fitton and Bannon about this. You see it starting to blow up on Twitter, starting to make the rounds and text messages and signal chats, the favored means of communication in Washington, D.C. And there's nothing publicly known yet, but I have heard from sources that I've reached out to that Grassley and the Senate and the Senate Committee Republicans have put together some quick meetings for this evening with different senators who wanted to actually talk to Ed Martin, which makes me think either one, they're spooked by that campaign, or two, they legitimately just forgot about this. It was a total scheduling screw up. But there is actual movement tonight. There's no tweets going out so far. There's nothing confirmed. And we could find out very shortly if this is actually going to happen, or if Judge Boasberg, who is a very political anti-Trump Skeletor creature, is actually going to be in charge of who gets Trump's appointment.
Chris, it's unbelievable, how the campaign started against Martin when you just had almost every left-leaning person in the country come out and castigate him, start throwing rocks and bricks in his general direction. They clearly were frightened of someone like him taking this office over. And that's striking. For the Republicans, on the other hand, I imagine that what's hanging over all their heads right now is Donald Trump and some other heavyweights, bringing some justice or expressing their public displeasure against any senator who runs against Martin. And they act like he's some kind of crazy candidate, of course, in the campaigns against him. But we have almost half of the attorney generals in the country now supporting him, including Ken Paxton. And I'm just wondering how much is this is resting on the president getting involved?
I think the president getting involved would be huge. I don't know. I mean, it's going to take somebody having to call him up and I'll go to him and say, I need you to make some phone calls. And hopefully he doesn't actually have to waste his time on this sort of thing. This is just another example, too, to your point, Matt, about how the culture of Senate Republicans hasn't really changed, even if the voting habits have. They still act like controlled opposition in so many different ways. They still let Democrats run completely roughshod over them literally trying to prosecute and put President Donald Trump in prison, putting Steve Bannon, we saw a minute ago, in prison, putting others in prison, Peter Navarro in prison, going after the January 6 rioters and protesters and trespassers with the full vengeance of the law, which Ed Martin's predecessor did, which Joe Biden did, which Merrick Garland did, which the previous directors of the FBI have done. This is the politicization, and Republicans say on the campaign trail, and we're going to do something about it. The only way to actually make it happen is with threats from the base, by actually paying attention, by noticing, by shows like ours talking about the mandate that has been given by the American people, not by Washington, D.C., which is literally the only Republican primary that went against Donald Trump, went for Nikki Haley. I mean, that is kind of it was a joke online, but it's also a glimpse into the way that people who live here and work here and staff these Republican agencies really do think.
Well, the opposite of the mandate is something like PBS and NPR. Now, PBS, they say they're independent. They're serving the community, but we know 90% of their gender coverage, it's all pushing the lefty views, right? We know Donald Trump, he just did something the American people wanted for a very long time. He signed the executive order defunding them, and it's about time. So let's watch what PBS CEO had to say about their network.
Both the combination of the fact that it was built as a public-private partnership, there would be some public money that went into public broadcasting that would enable stations in small communities to exist, alongside the fact that most of our support comes from people in communities. That really does create something that is very independent and very responsive to the communities that we serve.
I'm sorry, is she trying to get conservatives on board with this? Because starting with public-private partnerships, I don't think is the way to do that, Chris.
At least not for media platforms. I mean, I've listened to a lot of NPR in particular over the last couple of years for their bluegrass station, for their classical station, for their Celtic radio. And it's just appalling. The interviews, the newscasts that come in, the way that everything is slanted, the choice of stories, just the choice of stories, for example. Like let's take, for example, the average day during maybe the last election, previous election before that, when they wouldn't have said a single thing about Hunter Biden's laptop ever. I don't think I ever once heard a story, but I heard a story about the unknown plight of trans prostitutes' access to Massachusetts beaches. Things like that.
Important topics.
This was the coverage they went with. The story bias is just completely insane. It's laugh out loud sometimes. My wife would say, well, sometimes, why are you listening to this? It just makes you angry when you hear these commercials. I'm like, well, I like the music. It's worth it. But and a lot of this money, they claim they hide the shells. They hide the coin under the shells, where they try to pretend like they're not completely reliant on a lot of these actual federal grants and taxpayer money, but they actually disperse it, and they are more reliant, and they take more than they actually want to let on. They're like, oh, we only take hundreds of thousands, many, many, many more than that, through different places where they hide the money in a series of shell games, disperse it. People who donate to one program, they use it for another program, and if they want any evidence of what kind of response they've actually gotten and what kind of coverage they do, check out the people who actually listen to NPR and watch PBS. Is it a broad swath of the United States? Do they get a bunch of Republican readers, listeners, or is it largely upper middle class, college educated white women who seem to tune into this, and the original season ticket holders of the Kennedy Center before they all quit under Donald Trump. Those are the types who are attracted to this. And at the same time, we've talked about this in the show. What a lot of these channels are doing through the news programs basically amounts to an in-kind contribution to Democrats in their constant attacks and constant going after of Republicans and their constant defense of Democrats and their policies. I mean, taxpayers might as well be paying for an arm of the DNC, a radical arm of the DNC.
It is unbelievable to me. I remember growing up, my grandfather used to listen to a lot of classical music through NPR, and every time they got into their season where they asked for money, he would say, "I'm not listening to the beggars," and turn it off for a period of weeks because he was so annoyed with how they were pressing people for money to donate. But I agree with you. There's a cultural aspect to this that is. It's a good thing if there's stations, right, that are playing this music that's being lost, that I enjoy as well. Yeah. But that's what streaming's for, sadly. And if you got to listen to a bunch of lunatics talk every so often, and the government's paying for it, that just doesn't make any sense. We don't need this. We can still listen to great music and have great people curate it the hell outside of government funding.
Yes, and I've given donations in the past to specific shows and DJs. Of course, I'm on the phone with them for half an hour trying to get some kind of assurance that my money's not going to go to their news programs. And they assure me that it's not, but I'm not stupid. I also know that it's probably being dispersed throughout the entire thing. They're not like Chris Bedford's $100 grant must be carefully guarded in its intentions. But with that, in the case of music and in the case of culture, that's going to take a conservative resurgence. I mean, we talk about this in our magazine Frontier. We talked about this for years. Conservatives do have to pay attention to the importance of culture. They can't just take over the Kennedy Center and put a bunch of politicos on there. They have to put people on there who actually care about this sort of stuff, who care about this music, who care about the American history and lineage. I mean, honestly, the history of great American mountain music, Scots-Irish music, country music should not really be in the hands of left-wing lunatics anyways. It's a legacy that belongs to the United States and its people. And I pray that this sort of move would actually maybe potentially cause some course correction at an NPR and other places where they might have to now appeal to a broader base of people who are actually willing to support them.
Well, Chris, I fear I might have to make a call to Ed Martin today because this is casual Bedford. I don't know what's going on right now, but there is no suit and tie over there for Cinco de Mayo.
It is, why? I was coming downstairs, the baby was hollering, she just let out the most adorable burp. I don't know when girls stop doing that, but we're not yet at the age where they've learned to stop doing that. And my wife's got tacos on the slow cooker and tortillas out, and the kids are outside with bicycles. I'm about to run outside with them, and I said, you know what?
Casual.
We're going full Matt Peterson today.
That's perfect.
And even he would wear a coat.
I'm the best dressed person, or the most dressed up person on the show. But I see you're repping the old school Izod. I was about to say something about it too, but then I saw that. I'm like, oh, nice. Good work. Good work.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I listen to the music that Grandpa listened to, wear the shirts that Grandpa wore.
Yeah. That's perfect. That's the vibe we're going to have for Cinco de Mayo. Bedford, thanks so much.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Our next guest will explain why a pro-America test should replace the SAT for college admissions. Coming up. It feels good. Cinco de Mayo. We're winning. We love winning. The momentum, we know it's on our side here for conservatives, but we still have a long ways to go. And that's why Blaze TV exists, because we need to keep pushing, right? We have all the great reporting. We have the stories that the corporate media absolutely won't touch. But when you subscribe, you're not just watching Blaze TV, you're standing with a movement. And that's why right now it's just $8 a month when you use my code BNT at checkout. So go to blazetv.com/BNT right now. Use that promo code BNT and save $20 off your annual plan. So let's keep winning together. Blaze TV, unfiltered, unafraid, on demand. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has made it his priority to reform the military, and we've already seen a complete rejection of DEI. But now there's a new idea on the table. James Fishback is asking Hegseth to let service academies like West Point accept the classic learning test as an alternative to the SAT. So Inez Stepman, she's the senior legal analyst for the Independent Women's Forum. She joins us now with more on this. So Inez, first of all, thanks so much for joining the show tonight. But you posted on X saying that you think this is a great idea. So what is the classic learning test first?
Well, it's an alternative to the SAT and other tests that you might be familiar with, like the ACT. And the dirty secret is, even though you often hear people on the right relying on these tests as a measure of merit, for example, the SAT is administered by the College Board, which is one of the most aggressively woke organizations in education. And they've been watering down the substance of the SAT, frankly, for some number of decades, at least 25 years. A lot of things that older viewers might remember from the SAT, like analogies, those have been gone for decades, right? So the test is very different than it used to be. It's very watered down. It also is somewhat ideological in a way that it didn't used to be. Whereas the classical learning test is an alternative that I think would be great to have our major institutions, especially military institutions, accept, because it tests the sort of things that are important for citizenship in this country.
Inez, great to have you on. We love our friend Inez coming on the show. She's been killing it on Twitter. Thanks. And with a new podcast as well. We'll have to talk about at the end of this. But when you think about this test, which I think is very interesting and sorely needed, speak a little bit to why this is especially needed at the military academies.
Well, I'm sure everybody remembers the viral incident with the guy with the Marxist stuff inside his graduation cap, right? The reality is the military hasn't been exempt from the same institutional takeover forces of the left. They've been just a little bit, lagging behind, for example, universities, of course, that dove headfirst into that ideological morass. But the fact is that the military academies and thus the military were also caught up in this ideological, I don't know what to call it, cultural revolution, right? So this would be a really strong move to show that we understand exactly the ideological nature of a lot of these institutions, and we are dropping those institutions that do not serve us, the American people. Would be an explicit move saying we want to test our graduates in these elite military academies to see if they know the passages about the Constitution, right? You can show your demonstration or your learning, your sort of reading ability, for example, in almost any number of passages, but the ones on the SAT are going to be very different than the ones on the CLT. And the CLT also is going to show us that you're familiar with the Constitution, that you understand the three branches of government, that you have read some of these passages about the greats of Western civilization. I think will be a really good indication that this administration understands how to kind of wrench our educational systems, whether they're military or otherwise, off of this ideological path that also, frankly, robs students of the kind of Western learning that used to be synonymous with higher education.
Well, let's move on from the service academies over to Harvard, because you wrote something on X to the effect of the left decided a long time ago that the Civil Rights Act beats the First Amendment. Right now, Harvard is about to get burned by that logic. So can you explain what's happening here with America's top university?
Well, universities are having to obey the federal laws. That's really the beginning and end of this story. Universities have made their money for decades and decades and decades, relying on the generosity of taxpayers. And one of the strings that came with all of those federal billions was that they were going to adhere to the Federal Civil Rights Act. And frankly, this was just something that universities did not think were going to be enforced against them, even though as they were enforced against other institutions, right, in ways that vastly stretch the text by the left. If you think about how the left has used Title IX or Title VII or Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, all in different ways to try to force their agenda, now we see an administration that has the spine, frankly, to actually look at the text where it says you cannot discriminate on the basis of race and apply it to universities where they're very clearly discriminating on the basis of race, whether it's in admissions, whether it's in hiring, whether it's by preventing, for example, Jewish students from egressing the Quad, which is a very clear violation. We can talk a little bit more about that if you like, but there is a difference between words and action, and Title VI only applies to action, like blocking a student on the basis of race. So universities have basically been in flagrant violation of all of these titles for a long time, and nobody looked into it because Democrats obviously wouldn't want to, because they're ideological and agree, they're ideological fellow travelers, right? And Republicans inexplicably for decades refused to use these billions in funding to prevent universities from very basically breaking the law in favor of their ideology. So that's come to an end. I think it is one of the best things that has come out in the first 100 days of the Trump administration. And I think it's a move that will continue to pay dividends for years, even after the Trump administration leaves office.
Yeah, so I want to ask you about where this goes, because there seems to be two facts that are very positive, and we'll see, where it goes. They're squeezing universities. One is, as you just laid out, the case against them is very clear. I mean, whether you're talking about removing, portraits of people off the wall because of their race at Princeton, or the admission standards that they have everywhere where they're discriminating on the basis of race. It seems very cut and dry, I think, and most people will get that when it's explained to them. And on the other hand, you have an administration that seems very dedicated to this. I don't think they're going to back down. We had a great interview with May Mailman at the White House not long ago, who's the deputy for Stephen Miller. And, she was just saying there was no hesitation. She was saying, well, they're going to have a choice and they're going to have to make their choice. Okay. But on the other side of that, these are powerful institutions that have been doing this for years, that in many cases have billions of dollars. And it seems to me, what are they going to do next? Maybe some things we don't expect. I don't know. Do you think they're just going to get in line? How long do you think it takes to actually force them into line?
Those stages of grief, I think they're in the kicking and screaming denial stage right now. But ultimately, I think the Trump administration will win this battle. And that's because universities have made their entire business model dependent on federal money. They didn't have to do that, right? Hillsdale College famously takes no federal money, whether it's grants that the Trump administration is looking at, or the big kahuna, which is federally backed student loans. Places like Hillsdale College, Bob Jones University, they don't take anything, right? And that's part of the reason they didn't want some of these strings that come from Washington that's attached to this money. Now, universities can kick and scream. They're going to definitely try to, pull every argument out of the legal arsenal that they can to try to fight these. But at the end of the day, I think the law is very clear here. And I think they just simply become used to operating without oversight because, frankly, as we know, even though Republicans sometimes won elections, against Democrats, a large part of that Washington bureaucracy just stayed the same. And they could rely on that Washington bureaucracy never to look at the law this way, never to enforce the law against them, their friends, right? And that's frankly what's been going on. And I think now probably they're scrambling and realizing, oh, hey, we actually have quite a lot of liability here. So look, to me, it's a win-win. Is it possible that Harvard will take some of their $53 billion endowment and apply it to actually running the university instead of building it like a hedge fund? In my view, you know what? That's great. If they want to be a truly private institution and they want to charge in a private way people, for the kind of classes that are now available at Harvard, they want to charge people $80,000 or $100,000 or $150,000 for that degree, then fine. But they can't do it with taxpayer money. And that's what the Trump administration is saying. And it's something that Republicans should have been saying all along.
Yeah, we need them to get from the denial phase to the acceptance phase, and the country will be so much better when that happens. You mentioned Title IX, and we've seen the University of Pennsylvania was actually found violating this by the Department of Education. So my question, you mentioned it earlier, do they have a spine or not when it comes to this? Are they going to actually see an end to the federal funding, or are they just going to get a slap on the wrist like we've done so many times before?
Well, I absolutely think the Trump administration is going to see this through. There has been no indication. You mentioned May Mailman. There's been no indication from her, from Stephen Miller, from Trump himself that this is going anywhere, that they're going to cave. And I think what you are really seeing is, again, the kicking and screaming phase. I think universities will either have to go fully private, which a few of them can. Maybe Harvard can, because it has an endowment the size of a small country's GDP. But most universities will not be able to do that. And you will see, especially, I think, universities in that sort of second tier under the Ivy League start to look at the way that they're operating and how they can or can't attract those kinds of federal grants. And I think it's really going to transform the higher ed system. I'm very optimistic about this because, like I said, I think this is going to continue after this 4 years, because guess what? Yes, let's say the worst happens. We have a new crazy Democrat in office after 4 years. University budgets can't be thought of, the financial trajectory of the university can't only be thought of in 4-year increments. What Donald Trump has laid down is the marker for every Republican, official who comes after him, every Republican elected official, president in Congress. He's laid down a new marker which says the Republican Party will not acquiesce to continuing to force taxpayers to fund what are essentially woke madrasas that benefit the elite. And I don't think universities are going to be able to get around that. They have to be able to think in a longer time frame than only the years that Democrats are in office. So I think this is going to cause some permanent changes to the way that our universities are run. And if a few universities want to defy this and spin off and become entirely private, that's fine. But the university as a sector as a whole cannot afford that.
Amen to that. Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about May Mailman, of course, is that like many others in the Trump administration, she has an Ivy League degree. She has a degree from Harvard and is against it precisely probably because of that experience. I see many younger conservatives who come out of those universities. The difference in the last 10 years is that now they say they need to be punished. And we've spoken about this before. It was a turning point, and it's amazing and it's great. And let's say the Trump administration goes forward on this. I guess that we can't lose sight of the larger picture, which is that we actually need universities that teach American history and civics in a real way. They actually teach the truth. They teach people to love their country, to understand their country, and how to work within that system. And I can't help but notice you have a book on your shelf written by someone who I believe you know or is close to you, called The War on History, and they've been waging that war for decades. So how does this translate, do you think, into the positive? How do we get to the new institutions or reform? Is it going to be, are these institutions, some of them going to reform themselves? Is it going to be up to new institutions to reverse that war on history and actually teach the real thing?
I think the answer is both and you're right that the real challenge here is to build something new and to build something good out of the ashes of what clearly needs to go. And whether the, sort of legacy institutions are going to persist through this shift in higher ed is still very much up in the air. But I do believe that better things will be built. And part of the reason that I believe that is not just sort of this airy, gauzy, like I just believe in the truth, right? I think it's because for the first time, the right is going to put some of those incredible number of billions into that project, right? If there's one thing that's true about America is when there are billions in the offer, people step up, right? They step up to build things when there's so much money on the table and so much money to be made. And make no mistake, universities may be classifying themselves as nonprofits, but there is a lot of money in their industry, and most of it is being spent by taxpayers. And so that's why I think these moves are so powerful. It's not just about punishing institutions that are no longer deserving of those taxpayer dollars, but it's about encouraging institutions who are deserving of that, who are going to give young Americans, the best and brightest, an actual elite education, a Western classical education that not only makes them, more likely to go out into the business world and succeed, but also makes them better citizens, better, leaders in their communities, all those things that we actually, believe in when it comes to higher ed. I think we're going to start seeing some of those billions put behind that project. And, I can't wait to see where this goes. Honestly, I truly believe I have a little daughter, 6 months old. I don't think the college world that she's going to grow up into is going to look anything like the college world that we've experienced for the last 50 to 70 years. And I am so thankful for that. I think that it's going to be really exciting new, landscape in the higher ed space that does actually maybe make something worthy of the name higher education.
Well, you have built something new yourself in the last minute that we have here. You have your new podcast. It's High Noon. Tell us about that.
That's not new, and I actually closed it, so I don't know where I had that for a few years, but I haven't been doing it for the last 6 months. Sorry
that's great.
To do that live on air for you guys. Yeah,
that's all good. It's all good.
Well, look it up. There's some great conversations, I think, including with Matt.
Perfect. Yeah, we definitely will. So Inez, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
We'll get you back into the Cinco de Mayo spirit with a classic Trump post after this. It's Cinco de Mayo, and that means one thing. It's the 9th anniversary of one of Donald Trump's greatest posts of all time. So I gave you all a holiday greeting on X today. Happy Cinco de Mayo, Patriots. I wrote throwback to Trump's epic 2016 Taco Bowl tweet that broke the internet. So I wanted to ask you how you are all celebrating. Let's go ahead and start with Fred. He says, happy Cinco de Mayo. Time to celebrate with a savage Trump-style taco bowl loaded with freedom, extra guac, and a heap of liberal meltdown sauce. Extra credit if you don your sombrero while blasting the MAGA anthems. That is one killer way to start off Cinco de Mayo.
You know, I love this tweet because I remember when this happened, millions of people on the other side broke out saying, this is terrible, this is racist. And the GOP, members of the establishment GOP said the same thing, like, oh, you're never going to win Hispanics. And of course, Trump just won Hispanics by historic margins for any Republican. And, everyone thought it was funny.
I love this one from Joe. This year and in future years, we are celebrating the marriage of my grandson. He is getting married today. So congratulations out there to the happy couple.
Oh, nice. Great.
Good way to do this here on Cinco de Mayo, and actually really easy to remember that anniversary as well. And Harris rounds it out with a beautiful meme. Happy Cinco Deported. I have seen a lot of those that a lot of people are linking the two together, and rightfully so. Again, you're actually going to get $1,000 if you do so right now through the new app.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, I mean, this meme is very happy. I think a lot of Americans are sharing it for good reason, and it's almost another holiday. We need to do this for a couple more years with the deportations, and we'll be back to citizenry. Good thing.
If you can get, $1,000 and maybe use it to get some of your old California burritos, that might be the way to go.
Yeah, I see Buck Sexton is on X, and we love Buck Sexton, great guy. But he's posting about how taquitos are better than burritos, and it's one of these things where you're just like, I don't know what he's saying. Maybe he's talking about the food he serves his children. But I think a lot of people on the East Coast just have never had an actual burrito, which is not like you've been here for a couple generations and you start to put cheese on it and it's very middle class, sort of Tex-Mex. Tex-Mex is fine, it's good, but it's the food of the people who are the workers. That's the fresh California burrito. There's no cheese in it. That's how you know it can be a good one. And I would take Buck Sexton, out in Southern California anytime to sample actual burritos.
Cheese makes everything better. It's a known fact. I wonder what Buck Sexton would think about what we would do back in Iowa, where we have taco pizza. It's the best of both worlds. You love tacos, you love pizza. We put them together. It's phenomenal.
I mean, you said there's two different places that have two different kinds
Casey's
of taco
or Happy
pizzas.
Joe's. You have the one that you like the best.
Look, I'm not against taco pizza. Like, that's fine. It sounds good, I have to admit. It's just a little different than, the burritos I'm talking about.
I can only imagine what Buck Sexton, what everybody in our audience would think, but it's delicious. This weekend, I was looking up pizza balla, and no, that is not a food. That is somebody who might be the next pope. And speaking of the pope, let's go ahead and take a look at Donald Trump talking about his certain AI creation from over the weekend.
Some Catholics were not so happy about the image of you looking like the Pope.
Oh, I see. You mean they can't take a joke? You don't mean the Catholics. You mean the fake news media. Not the Catholics loved it. I had nothing to do with it. Somebody made up a picture of me dressed like the Pope, and they put it out on the internet. That's not me that did it. I have no idea where it came from. Maybe it was AI, but I know nothing about it. I just saw it last evening. Actually, my wife thought it was cute.
Let me talk about this. I'm someone who goes to church every week to Mass. And this is a remarkable moment to me because of the fake uproar about this picture and this joke. You might think the joke is dumb, but I I personally, of course, don't know anyone who's really up in arms about it besides politically motivated people. And what's insane about this is that we have had years of anti-Catholic action from people pretending to be Catholic or saying they're Catholic. We have an entire media ecosystem that says horrible, blasphemous things every day. And you're honestly expecting me or anyone else who's Catholic to get angry about this meme. That's ridiculous. It reminds me a lot of the left when they tried to get up in arms about Trump. Said Trump, he treats women terribly, he's awful, as if they stood on some moral high ground. And then Trump destroyed all of that by bringing Bill Clinton's gals to that debate with Hillary Clinton. And that was a famous pivotal moment that took all the air out of their sails. You know why? Because after years and years of expending moral capital, you finally run out of it. And that's why no one's outraged about this, really.
I look at this and one, clearly it should have been J.D. Vance that they were going to put out there. I mean, the actual Catholic in the White House right now, let's go ahead and use him. But no, I think it is, to your point, it's fake outrage, and especially conservatives. We've seen this used over and over and over again against Donald Trump. What, like he would, if he was here right now, he'd be like, Russia, Russia, Russia. Like, you don't have anything to really latch onto right now. So they are just grasping at whatever little thing comes out. And guess what? Over the weekend, everybody thought it was funny. It wasn't an insult. We can all take a joke. Donald Trump is not going to go out there and be the next pope. We all know this. Just let it go.
I mean, even if you think it's, well, it's kind of a cringe meme, it's not my cup of tea, or you think it's dumb. No one takes it this seriously. We're saying this is blasphemy and how dare you do this in a society where we see all kinds of crazy, terrible stuff every day. And again, real action by people who say they're Catholic, doing all kinds of things that are not. So in a world of Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, the idea that Catholics are going to get upset and be against President Trump because of this meme is absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, have at it. Like, keep doing this stuff because it's not working. The thing is, again, they expend moral capital through hypocrisy. And even in this unjust world, if you do that in public over and over again, eventually people don't give a crap about what you have to say.
I, for one, just hope that Donald Trump goes out and has a taco bowl for dinner and puts it out so that we can all see it tonight. Are you going to
order some taco pizza?
Are you going? Well, if it's here in Dallas, I absolutely would. Are you going to eat any Mexican food tonight? Are you guys going to partake in this?
I have no idea. What I'm going to do tonight, I have no idea what I'm going to do from 1 hour to the other.
This is very true.
We're just Blaze Newsing it 24/7 with some crazy stories that we'll be bringing to you in the near future. But we usually do, oh yeah. And especially a margarita, maybe even a spicy margarita.
A little burrito action, a little margarita action.
Yeah, it's like the band Cake says, this is what I think about Cinco de Mayo. I don't know much about Cinco de Mayo. I don't really know what it's all about, is one of their lines. And I don't, but I love the holiday itself, the way it's celebrated with food and booze. I'm okay with that.
You realize that I did all that just to try to get you back to that line because you were singing it earlier today. And I really, really, really wanted you to sing that on the show.
I don't know much about Cinco. I'm not going to sing.
Yes, you did, though. You can keep going. I'm going to encourage this.
I don't really know what it's all about. I'm just going to say it. Actually, he doesn't sing either. Lead singer Cake. He just kind of says the lines.
It was your chance. It was your chance to karaoke in front of everybody. Thanks for joining us here tonight, everybody. We'll be back with more tomorrow.
Another time.